Well, here we are. We have got a number of people to talk about what it is to be in education in the UK in different contexts. We've had various things in the last few days, thinking about people in faith who are involved one way or another in education, whether that's early years or secondary or further or whatever it might have been. So today it's a little bit different. What we're doing is looking at really simply the fact that there are people out there in the world who actually have a faith working with education somehow. So I've got four people for you today. I've got Lizzie, Stuart, Anne, and Tamsin. We're going to come to each person and think, well, why are they here? So let's start with you, Lizzie. Who is it you work for and what is it you do?
So I work for the Association of Christian Teachers. We're a membership organisation that seeks to unite Christians from every area of education, whether they're a teacher, a learning support assistant, even office staff, or whatever role people may have. We seek to resource them to be we seek to resource them to be effective ambassadors for Christ, and we support them in their vocation to be salt and light. So that's what we do. And I was a classroom teacher for 12 years, but now I work on the other side, supporting, resourcing, and helping to connect Christians together so they can be excellent ambassadors for the Lord Jesus.
Fab. And same for you, Stuart. What's your area of expertise?
Hi. I work for a school down on the south coast. It's an all-through school. I've had over 20 years experience in primary, but I'm now teaching in the secondary sector. I am leading RE at the moment across the school, and we're developing the RE curriculum there. And in my spare time, I'm also doing some research in education. I'm doing a professional doctorate in education, looking at how parents see the connection between the Christian upbringing of their children and their schooling, and what links they understand there to be between those two.
Anne, obviously, a more of a familiar face for my listeners, but Anne, what is it you do?
I am a sensory specialist occupational therapist and created a sensory super system to help equip and empower all teaching staff and parents to understand, to assess the sensory needs of their students, of their family members, and help them thrive at school, regardless of any age.
True indeed. And then Tamsin, where do you work? What is it you do?
So I'm right at the other end of the spectrum in terms of ages, because I'm an early years consultant. I'm here as a trustee of an organisation called Love Early Years, and we support, from a Christian perspective, people who work with our youngest children, really, and wherever they are. So whether they're in a preschool, a nursery, a school, a toddler group, childminder, nanny, it could be any kind of role, and we support them and hopefully promote a Christian voice in early years education as well.
So for each of you, faith obviously is a part of who you are. It's a part of what you are, and it's definitely going to be influencing what you do in various kind of contexts. Just coming back to you, Lizzie, how does your own faith, I know you're supporting Christian teachers, but how does your faith influence then how you actually interact in order to support the various staff that you help?
Well, I am a Christian. I've been a Christian for many years now. And when I was teaching, I experienced some level of, I wouldn't say opposition, but I'd certainly say some level of discomfort when it came to discussing issues of faith in schools, and to be really confident in what I can and can't do. And as an enthusiastic Christian who firmly believes the truth of the gospel, I want to be sure that what I'm doing and saying is going to please my Lord and Saviour, but also is not going to get me in trouble, but to make the most of every opportunity. And so it was that compelled me, once I got to kind of read a bit more, do a bit more research, to really go and help to connect and resource Christians in education, to give them the tools that they need to be effective ambassadors for Christ, not to be sort of clumsy and punchy, but to be salt and light, to be gracious, to speak truth in love, and also to give comment on educational issues, to go on behalf of Christians who perhaps feel a little bit vulnerable, so that there is still a Christian voice in the world of education, because it's so crucial for our young people that they have the opportunity to hear about Jesus in schools. I don't think we realise in this country just how fortunate we are to still have legal provisions such as the Daily Act of Collective Worship, or to be able to teach RE, reflecting the fact that we are historically and culturally, we still have major Christian influences in our society, and RE should reflect that. And we have wonderful tools at our disposal. And I just want to help Christians feel confident knowing that they can still be salt and light, and they can still talk about Jesus, not in a confrontational way or in a way that demands a response. But it is my faith in Jesus that inspires me to do that and to help other Christians to feel confident.
Stuart, same question really. How does that affect what you're doing?
I think there's two areas really. Day to day, it's about creating a space in school, I think, where children can see people who have a faith themselves, and that this is a possibility in the modern world. We often see faith portrayed as something perhaps a little bit backward or behind or whatever, but actually to see that this is something that's intellectually viable, that you can approach academic things through a faith perspective, I think is important. And so providing that kind of intellectual space in the school, but I think as well also where it's appropriate to do so, taking opportunities to present the gospel, obviously not evangelizing, but in terms of RE and the teaching about Christianity, giving a honest and true version of the gospel, so that children can hear that, and what they make of that is obviously up to them. But I think that's important to create that space where people can see that this, thinking people can have faith as well, and this is something that might be an option for you too.
And then Anne, faith, occupational health, sensory health, how do they all tie together?
Yeah, well, I had an interesting journey always as a Christian and as an occupational therapist. But in 2018, I was really convicted that I needed to come out as a Christian OT. So I developed CHOTS at the time, which is Christian Occupational Therapy Support. And then that grew into Christian Sensory Support. And that has now merged with sensory health services with an element of Christian sensory support, so that people join, but we know that there is an extra time for prayer. There's an extra mindset that people... we just need Christ at the very center, especially when you're dealing with really difficult and challenging behaviors and you're not sleeping and eating and relationships are just really stressed. To have Christ at the center just makes such a difference, and to have his mindset over the whole, everything that you need to think and to be. So that's very much bringing in both a therapy perspective, but having that additional, for those who want it, that additional overt Christian emphasis and teaching and support and prayer through that side of it.
And then Tamsin, early years, where does your faith sit with what it is that you're doing on a day-to-day basis?
So my own kind of faith journey in my career, so to speak, started when I was a very young teacher many years ago, because I actually did a course with my church, which was called a Kaleo course, which was all about your calling. And by the end of the weekend, it was one of those weekend kind of courses. And by the end of it, you pulled all your ideas together into a statement which summarized God's calling on your life, which over the weekend you prayerfully and reflectively kind of come to. And my statement was, and I'm going to read it, so forgive me for reading this, but to practically demonstrate God's love to children, friends, family, and colleagues through personal evangelism. So that was kind of the statement that as an early teacher was really shaping my career, because I began to see my workplace and the community as somewhere that I could live out my calling. And so over the years, I've kind of applied that, if you want to put it that way, in lots of different ways. So from when I was bringing up my own children, I started a creche. Before that, actually, I started a creche in church. And then when I had my own family, I ran a toddler praise little group and a community toddler group. And I've sort of, in my consultancy career, I've actually been researching love and looking into a loving pedagogy, and all of that around young children, supporting young children. And you know, in the Bible it says, doesn't it, that Jesus said, let the little children come to me, for the kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these. But I think sometimes young children are a little bit overlooked within society and perhaps sometimes within our church communities as well. And so I think it's great that we can kind of promote young children's spirituality as well, because they can have a really true and meaningful relationship with Jesus and see Jesus as their friend from a very, very young age. So that's kind of how I've come into it, really.
I think one of the things about education generally is we can often think, well, here in the UK, at least, I mean, some of you have been sort of referencing this in various contexts, there's a lot of Christian culture and background and history there. But often we can think, oh, we mustn't do this and we mustn't do that. You know, I teach in secondary school, therefore I can't talk about Jesus. Well, actually, you can. Actually, no, I work with young children. You can still bring Jesus in, or people who are helping those with sensory health. There's all these different elements. But actually, our faith, it isn't just a hat that we stick on a Sunday, but perhaps that's sometimes all we think we were allowed to do. So I guess for each of you, as you come back around, how have you found the landscape changed, and how would you then encourage someone to share their faith either with the children they're serving or the adults they're serving, or whatever your specialty is? But how would you encourage someone? Do you know what? Yes, you can. How would you encourage others to do what you're doing, which is to be a Christian in your vocation? Lizzie?
I mean, there are many ways to do that. The first thing I would do is, if you're a teacher, a Christian teacher, and you're at school, I would make it really clear from day one, not necessarily saying, hello, I'm Lizzie, I'm a Christian, but giving that part of your life, offering it up as a piece of information that is as important as anything else. I'm married, I've got kids, or whatever. I live in this part of the town. Because then that provides a natural kind of springboard for conversation. It's not something you're hiding, and it's something that people know is really, really important to you. I think the other thing is making sure that you're not manipulating or monopolizing on opportunities. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't talk about Jesus, but don't manufacture really awkward situations in order to talk about Jesus to students. There will be numerous questions, I can guarantee us, particularly if you're in secondary school. Kids love to find out about your personal life. And obviously you've got to be careful there. Boundaries are very important. But many kids will say something that can just spark a natural conversation. I had many kids in my classes who would say something and I'd say, oh, I'm not so sure about that. Or I'd say, oh, please don't use that language, I don't like it. Particularly if they would say something that I found perhaps slightly offensive as a Christian. And they'd say, why, miss? And I'd say, well, I'm a Christian, and actually the name of Jesus is really precious to me. And that would spark a really interesting conversation. And again, in other subjects like English, which I was a specialist in, and obviously topics such as RE, there are some really legitimate opportunities to explore themes and ideas and theology even. And there's also incredible opportunities in assemblies, in even at lunchtime. Christians can start up Christian groups at lunchtime. Doesn't mean you'll always get complete kind of buy-in from leadership. But there's nothing wrong in suggesting to leadership, look, I've got a group of students who are asking me for this. It particularly goes well if the students are asking for it, and more we're seeing that they are. Something that's optional, something that just helps children or young people to explore what Christianity says. It doesn't place any sort of expectation that they will, be confessing Christians, but just something that can help them explore. Nothing wrong with those things, because other groups happen at lunchtime. So I would say, as Christian teachers, you've got so much freedom. You probably don't realise it. And sometimes it's the fear of the judgment of man that will stop us from doing that. But be open and honest from day one about who you are and your trust in Jesus. That is definitely one of the best things I could advise.
Stuart, same question. How can you help people who are thinking, where's my faith fit into this?
Well, one by one, Lizzie has just gone for all of the points I was going to make. So I'm just going to briefly echo some of her things. I think, yeah, absolutely. Speak personally. I think teachers, sometimes we are frightened of what we can and can't say, and there are legitimate bounds within the classroom context. But I think if we speak personally, we can find those opportunities to talk about our own faith and how it affects our lives and our perspective on things. And I often sort of use myself as an example when I'm teaching all sorts of different subjects, and I can bring in my Christian perspective. Then I think looking at putting on groups and things for students, as Lizzie's mentioned, we have some people who are going to schools locally, and they do what's called a big questions club, and it's not specifically for Christians, but it's open for anyone who's kind of exploring those questions. And people can come and share their own ideas. So that's sometimes a way in. You might want to be more explicit and consider a Christian union, something like that. But I think just be open, be yourself, and look for those opportunities, because they are there. So be encouraged. It's tough sometimes, but they are there. And I think the impact that we can have, we may not see initially. We may not even know the impact that we have and the words that we say, but they are there, and those words are powerful. So take those chances.
Anne, same question to you, really. I mean, occupational health, it's a slightly different perspective, but how can you encourage people in what it is that you do to say, you know what, your Christianity is part of who you are?
Yeah, I think because the main focus of the people that I would be supporting are those who are really disruptive, they're really challenging in the class, they're harder to love. And it's that call to bring out that extra. We all need to draw on that compassion. We need to draw on the Holy Spirit to really help us to have the mind of Christ when we're dealing with really challenging situations, and the impact that it has on the rest of the class when we're dealing with those that are particularly harder to love and harder to deal with. So I think a massive thing is that looking at who you are and how you are, and how much are you allowing God to really work through you, so that you don't actually, you're not collapsing at the end of the day, but it becomes a natural, a really, really deep part of who you are, and that witness of how you deal with those more potentially challenging, more individuals. But also the recognition that actually academics, when we're in an academic situation, that isn't necessarily the be all and end all, and it's being able to show that actually we all have that worth. Just because we're God's creatures, God's creation, we are His, made in His image, and each of us are so valuable and wonderfully and fearfully made. And it's how the person within that classroom is able to make others feel and communicate that honour to each and every person within their classroom.
And then Tamsin, starting to see you might be different or difficult with early years, but how would you encourage somebody who's working in early years in terms of where they can bring their faith in?
So, really, it is echoing a lot of what's already been said, but I think it does come down to us being, honest and true and loving, very loving with the children. And, as Anne's just said about dealing with children who could sometimes be challenging, there are some quite challenging situations that early years teachers and practitioners will find themselves in relation to young children, some behaviours that we might struggle with, and how we respond to those children in that moment is a really good witness, and it can be quite important to kind of talk to others about why we do things in a particular way, and how we are loving the children, and so on. And of course, also in early years, stories are a great way to share our faith. So we can, share some of the Bible stories alongside, have some books in the book corner, which would actually be Bible stories, and so on and so forth. So, singing songs and rhymes, and, lots of those sort of more younger childrenish things that you might think about, really. So I think we can sort of do a lot of that with our young children as well, really.
Thank you, all of you. It's just interesting. I think we wanted to do something where we could really highlight, in the UK, within education, we've got a real good plethora of people from different perspectives trying to be authentically themselves as Christians in the workplace. And as difficult as that can be, the four of you just demonstrated beautifully by almost repeating what you've all said. Do you know what? It's not that complicated, and you actually can be yourself summing it up very, very broadly. But Lizzie's saying, start as you mean to go on would be how I would sum that up. Start, I am a Christian. So, right, if I'm a Christian on day one, let's be a Christian from day one, and not forcing conversations, because hey, who likes to be forced? None of us. And then all the way through from adults in early years and sensory health, it all matters. But actually, who you are is what's going to feed why you're there in the first place. And if you're a Christian, then your sole purpose is not, can I get a salary to buy a house? But actually, you're being called by God. It's a ministry. Ultimately, each one of you has your own ministry. And that's really precious and special. And the other part of this was just to say, to encourage people, look, within the education system in the UK, regardless of what you see on the news, there are some fantastic people, 4 of them represented here, who represented more than just themselves, but they're all working in education one way or another, supporting your child, your brother, your father, your sister. They have got Christ-like people around them, which is wonderful. We're going to do websites on a post, otherwise it might get complicated if you each give out your WWs, but we'll put that in. But thank you for taking the time today just to talk a bit about what it is you're doing within education very broadly here in the UK, and the fact that there are across early years, sensory health, secondary school, teachers and other staff, there is so much Christian support out there. That's just 4 people from 4 organisations. Then there are many, many, many more. So thank you to Lizzie, thank you to Stuart, thank you to Anne Laure Jackson, and thank you to Tamsin as well for being with us, just to share a bit of your heart and a bit of what you do. If you had one piece of advice, really short piece of advice you can give to somebody today, how do you encourage them within education, Lizzie? Putting you on the spot. I know.
One piece of advice, this is more for churches. Churches, support your teachers, and teachers, seek the support of your churches.
Like that one. Stuart?
Just a couple of weeks ago, I bought myself a new coaster to go on my desk at school, and it's got that verse, "Be still and know that I am God." That ultimately, it's not us, it's God that's at work, and we can rest in that.
Yep. Anne?
A heart of compassion. That was Christ's heart, and even the most challenging behaviours, that there's a root to it, and it's like, what's going on? Let's get there.
And then Tamsin.
And a loving pedagogy, and that would cross all ages, not just early childhood, but all the way up into college and university.
Thank you, Lizzie, Stuart, and Tamsin. Now, on our socials, we've got 3 prayer points from the last 4 days where you can look and think, how do I pray? I don't know. Well, we've done it for you. We've done the hard work. So if you look through the last 4 days of socials, you will see a simple way of praying for those involved in education, whatever context that might be. Thank you to all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.